Python or JavaScript, which should you learn? Let me break it down for you as simply as possible. Ultimately, what's going to determine the language you pick comes down to what you want to build or what area of development you want to specialize in. Both languages are great choices, but what they're best at differs quite a bit. So let's start with what's the same for both languages. They're both beginner-friendly, relatively easy to learn, in extreme demand, and can lead you quite quickly into a career in tech. Either is a great choice to start with, and if you're already learning one, I'd recommend stick it out, get the basics down, and then you can easily switch to another language afterwards. In fact, most developers I know, including myself, will learn one of these languages first, then very quickly after learn the other one. They're great complements to each other, so if you're already learning JavaScript, stick it out. If you're already learning Python, stick it out, and then later on, you can very quickly pick up the other language. Now, another thing you need to know is that both of these languages are dynamically typed. Now, to put it simply, what that means is they're a little bit more flexible to write code in, but they may not be the best choice for really large applications or anything that's performance critical. But what that does mean is that learning one of these languages is not going to teach you a drastically different set of features than the other one. So rest assured, if you pick JavaScript, almost everything you know is probably going to apply to Python. Same with Python, most of what you learn there is going to apply to JavaScript. The main difference will be some specific syntax features that you can pick up pretty quickly. So picking the wrong language is not a massive mistake, and at the end of the day, you just want to get started, but I'll give you some information that can help you make that decision. So now let's get into the main differences. Keeping in mind what I said before, that you want to focus on the outcomes and the type of projects you can build. So with JavaScript, you're going to be working a lot more on the front end. It's going to be a lot more visual, and you're going to be able to create user interfaces, make websites, and immediately just make more visual and interactable applications compared to a language like Python. If you're someone who wants to land a job and you're looking at front-end developer positions or full-stack developer positions, JavaScript is 100% the language that you should be learning. It very quickly allows you to interact with HTML and CSS, and by learning JavaScript as a product of that, you're probably going to learn a bit more about HTML, CSS, and front-end web development in general. Now, to compare that with Python, Python's a lot more focused on the back end and with data. It's really big for data analysis. So if you're someone who's interested in AI, automation, machine learning, back-end web development, automation tasks, or scripting, Python's going to be your go-to. It's definitely not as easy to create front-end or visual applications with Python. However, the tasks that I listed, it's really, really good at, and you'll find it a little bit easier to make those type of applications with a language like Python compared to something like JavaScript. Now, at this point, we definitely need to discuss frameworks and libraries, which kind of go hand in hand with the language you're learning. When you're just starting out, picking either Python or JavaScript isn't going to make a huge difference. The curriculum is going to be very similar, you're going to be learning pretty much the same topics, and the main thing that's going to differ is the syntax and really the way in which you write code. But that's something you can learn pretty quickly, and going between different languages, you'll very easily pick up the differences in syntax. The major differences are going to come when you want to actually start building out large applications, and you'll realize you need to use some external tools. Now, these are typically referred to as frameworks, libraries, or packages. They all have kind of a slightly different meaning, but in this case, we'll group them together. Now, each language that I mentioned here, Python and JavaScript, have a different set of very popular frameworks and libraries that are used to create applications. For example, with JavaScript, we have things like React, Vue, Angular, right? These are really popular front-end web frameworks that make it really easy to build large scalable applications, and they're typically in demand as their own skill alongside JavaScript. So if you want to be a front-end web developer, you're probably going to need to know something like React, and that means, well, you would have had to know JavaScript, right, to be able to work with React. Now with Python, we have popular frameworks specifically for data science or for automation tasks. So things like pandas, NumPy, scikit-learn, we have natural language toolkits. All of these types of things are really more ingrained in Python, and they don't necessarily exist for JavaScript, or if they do, they're not quite as specialized or as in demand. So what this leads me to recommend is that if you already know the type of projects you want to build or the jobs you might be interested in, go and look at the languages, frameworks, packages, etc. that are being used for those projects or that are required for that job, and then see the base language that's required to use those specific tools. A lot of times you'll need to know JavaScript as a prerequisite prerequisite to learn this framework, or you'll need to know Python to learn this package. So that's where I would go, and that's really what's going to be the major difference for you, the tooling you have access to and the type of things that you can build. Now, with all of that said, both of these languages are still very general purpose. Knowing one of these languages allows you to build so many different types of applications, and just because it's not the best at it doesn't mean you can't do it. For example, you can make an entire website using purely Python and a little bit of HTML and CSS. Now, is it going to be the best way to do that? Probably not. You're likely going to want to know some JavaScript and use that in your project. However, you can still do it with Python. It's possible to create user interfaces. It is even possible to make things like mobile apps using Python. It's just not recommended or what it's really meant for. Now with JavaScript, same thing. You can go and build machine learning applications. You can do data analysis. You can graph all kinds of numbers, but it's not going to be the best with JavaScript compared to something like Python, where Python is more designed for that type of task. At the end of the day, all programming languages are tools to help you achieve something. So you need to pick the best tool for the job. And that's why it's difficult when you're starting out to make this decision, because you might not even know the type of jobs that you want to perform. Now, what will mostly end up happening is you'll learn JavaScript and then you'll realize, hey, there's this thing I want to do that's kind of better in Python. You might try to do it in JavaScript, but at this point, you're probably good enough of a programmer that you can go and learn a bit of Python and you can achieve that task. Same thing, other way around. You might be really good at Python, but you want to implement some front-end user interfaces in your application. In that case, you may just go and decide to learn a little bit of JavaScript, exactly what you need to achieve that goal. And this goes for all different types of programming languages. That's why my advice is figure out the type of things you want to build or the type of jobs you want. Start learning that first language that's most suited towards kind of what you think you want to do. And as you start learning it, you'll realize it's relatively easy to transition into other languages, and you'll pick up the different tools that you need for the type of jobs that you're doing. Now, at this point, if you're still unsure, what I would encourage you to do is simply pick one of the languages, get started, learn the basics, and then you can easily change to the other language if you decide that it's not right for you. If you're looking for some resources to learn these languages, I have all kinds of videos on my channel that you can check out completely for free. But if you want a more premium resource, you're a bit more serious and you're really committed, then I do actually have a software development course with Course Careers. We've already had some people graduate that course and land jobs quite quickly. And what we do in there is teach you the fundamentals of programming and then allow you to pick your specialization track once you've gone through that. So if you're not sure, you go through, you learn all the fundamentals, then you can pick whether you want to specialize in front end, back end, or DevOps. And there's an additional course taught by an industry expert, free of charge. You can simply pick it once you graduate the fundamentals, which is taught by me. Anyways, you guys can check that out from the link in the description. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.